Hello again, and welcome back to the Slow Flowers podcast with Deborah Prinzing, episode 517. This is the weekly show about slow flowers and the people who grow and design with them. It's all about making a conscious choice, and I invite you to join the conversation and the creative community as we discuss the vital topics of saving our domestic flower farms and supporting a floral industry that relies on a safe, seasonal, and local supply of flowers and foliage. In celebration of the Slow Flowers podcast's 8th anniversary, last month, we launched our new live stream video format, The Slow Flowers Show, with the goal of sharing the faces and voices of our members, as well as tours of their farms, their shops, and their studios, and most of all, their flowers. The video edition of today's episode aired as the Slow Flowers Show on Wednesday, July 28th, simultaneously broadcast to both YouTube and Facebook Live. If you missed it, you can find the replay video in today's show notes at deborahprinzing.com for episode 517. This episode is brought to you by slowflowers.com, the free online directory to more than 880 florists, shops, and studios who design with local, seasonal, and sustainable flowers, and to the farms that grow those blooms. It's the conscious choice for buying and sending flowers. Before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors. Thank you to our lead sponsor for 2021, Farmgirl Flowers. Farmgirl Flowers delivers iconic burlap wrap bouquets and lush, abundant arrangements to customers across the U.S., supporting more than 20 U.S. flower farms by purchasing more than $9 million of U.S.-grown fresh and seasonal flowers and foliage annually. Discover more at farmgirlflowers.com. Our first sponsor thank you for the podcast goes to the Gardener's Workshop, which offers a full curriculum of online education for flower farmers and farmer florists. Online education is more important this year than ever, and you'll want to check out the course offerings at thegardenersworkshop.com. Today's guest is Deanna Kitchen, flower farmer based in Mount Vernon in the Skagit Valley north of Seattle, Washington, where so much great agriculture, especially floral agriculture, is rooted. Deanna and her family grow flowers, livestock, and 3 sons at Twig and Vine Farm, a 10-acre micro farm with just under 1/4 acres cultivated with flowers. As Deanna writes on the farm's website, dahlias are the reigning queen here, but we also love to grow unique foliages, vines, and whimsical bits like grasses and pods. I visited Twig and Vine a few weeks ago to film a video farm tour with Deanna. For podcast listeners, you'll hear our conversation today as Deanna harvests stems and discusses some of her favorite field crops. As she shared her story and the conversation naturally turned to her floral passion and mission, we discussed the Growing Kindness Project. Now an established nonprofit 501c3 organization, the motivation behind the Growing Kindness Project is a campaign of kindness that becomes a ripple of goodwill reaching across the world. Deanna likes to quote the late Anne Frank, who said, "No one has ever become poor by giving." The Growing Kindness Project is working to support anyone who wants to share kindness by growing and giving flowers. It provides support, education, and resources to help participants grow and give flowers, whether they are experienced gardeners or have never planted a single seed, whether they tend to a pot of flowers on a city balcony or produce acres of blooms on a flower farm. Deanna and her team of Growing Kindness ambassadors are motivated to help anyone grow kindness in their communities. Thanks for joining our conversation, originally recorded on July 22nd. It was a windy day, and I apologize that we had a lot of related audio challenges. But Deanna was a great host, and I'm so grateful that she was able to set aside time for me to visit and capture a slice of her world along with her story. Let's jump right in and meet Deanna Kitchen of Twig and Vine and the Growing Kindness Project. You can see photos and find links to all her social places in today's show notes for episode 517. Okay, we're back to recording. Tell me about your sweet peas. I love the trellising. It's just like...
Yeah, this was a fun, sweet peas for us haven't been, like I said, we really grow minimally for market. You and I were discussing earlier that this farm has really been a journey about figuring out what piece the flowers play. And it took a few years and still learning and realizing that the flowers are kind of a piece of the farm puzzle for us, but they're not the whole pie. Really what our hope and dream was is to cultivate a farm where people feel welcome and where it's beautiful and restful, and we could invite people into that with us, which is why we've leaned a little bit more into workshops and events, which obviously with the last 2 years, that's been really tough and odd.
Changed.
Yes,
right?
But eventually we'll be back in a real rhythm with that. But
great.
Totally
Let's harvest a little bit.
Yeah. Oh, so sorry. I was going to say with the sweet peas, they really have been about just what I love them. I enjoy them, but it's not like it's a cash crop for us. We tuck them in here and there with subscriptions or bouquet orders, but it's really just been about what's joyful for us here on the farm that looks beautiful. And so we had a dead tree that fell, and we just salvaged what we have. I think it's Arthur Ashe says, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. And that's been a very favorite guiding philosophy of mine.
That's a great philosophy. So you're going to cut a little bit, and then we're going to talk about what you are doing to. Well, you have two facets of your business. When we sit down, we'll maybe talk more about your newish project. But Twig and Vine, did it start out as a mainly CSA business, or?
Yeah, we have taken on all kinds of variations. When I very first started, my kids were really little. I'll put down this way. The kids were really little. I had actually just resigned my teaching position and staying at home with a toddler and a very newborn, and just really felt like I wanted something to do that was creative and an outlet in that way, and had some aspirations that we would be able to supplement income with a side business as well, and sort of, but that's come to fruition in lots of different ways. I can share more about that later.
And Deanna, you were at a different property anyway at that time, right?
Yes, we were on just an acre. Okay. And so how I started out was just thinking I wanted to be a wedding designer, which is funny now that I'm farther along. I think just, age and maturity, you can see yourself with greater clarity, but also recognizing that was not the best fit for me in terms of just the strengths that it needed and what I brought to the table. So really, really quickly learned that as a family, it did not fit our lifestyle. Really quickly learned that we weren't ready to sacrifice our only family time together on the weekends,
right,
for events. And we were in a season of life when inevitably, like, someone would have an ear infection or be up all night, the night that I was trying to work on a wedding. And so slowly kind of started shifting from that, and I tried a roadside stand because we were a little closer into town, like we were talking about. So I started growing flowers and selling them on a roadside stand, very small scale, and that was really joyful, and it was a good fit for us at the age the kids were. And it was about that time that we started looking for more property and looking for a farm. We've been both raised in really rural areas with lots of room to run, and we really wanted that for our kids. So that's how we ended up finding this farm, and that was kind of I would say I was just a couple years into my flower journey then. So I thought for sure that the thing to do, there's been a lot of learning that, what everybody else is doing isn't necessarily the thing that you should be doing. So I thought, I like this small, this scale of growing flower, or this process of growing flowers and selling them. I should go for market. That would be a good fit for me. And again, it was a process of learning that wasn't really tapping into what my natural strengths were and what brought us joy. So the first few years on the farm, we did subscriptions, and then some like retail sales or wholesale sales with florists, and some retail sales with pop-up shops in town. But kind of also really started realizing what was really joyful was the bringing people together around flowers and leaning into that. So I'd always kind of wondered, having been a teacher, what am I supposed to do with this? This
You're right.
that I feel naturally proficient at, but not necessarily the thing I want to keep doing as a career. So it was the first winter that we were here on the farm. You and I were just talking about, I was sharing that moving to this farm. This is actually our 5th year. Last week was our 5th anniversary of moving here. And we forget how far it's come because we can only see the projects that we still have to do. But we moved in, it was 1986 double wide. I was just sharing with you, there was a pothole so big in the driveway that you literally would like almost get lost in it driving here. It had been a rental for 10 years, and everything that you see here had been sinkholes we had cedar stumps that had been pulled and removed, and then the ground settled around. It was black, and we were infested with blackberries, morning glory, thistles. There was a lot to do. And yet there was also this tremendous freedom because we'd moved from this, what felt like a picture perfect, craftsman home that we'd painstakingly renovated, in a yard with truly, literally white picket fence and cottage garden. So to let go of that and move here, it almost felt like this fearless launch into just showing up as we were, and inviting people into that alongside of us. And so the very first winter we were here, we hosted a wreath workshop. And in the wreath workshop, nobody said anything, about the messes or any of those things. Nobody noticed that. Everyone was just so joyful to gather and create together. And it was a huge aha moment for me. This is what I want to be doing, is gathering people around for these really joyful experiences. And so that's really the way the farm has shifted. But along the way, I should probably walk and harvest something else.
Well, this was a Monarda you just harvested, right?
Yes, this one is lemon mint.
And lemon mint. It's such a pretty color.
This is one of my favorites, for sure.
It's kind of a blender too, because if you cut it early, you're getting a lighter tone. Or is that the older?
No, this is the younger, and then it matures. Some of these are a little past prime. That's okay for what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do with them today. But yeah, these guys, when they're like this, it's like ombre.
Right.
As it comes up. And then we actually had, I can't remember what variety this is. This is done now. Well, I shouldn't say it's done. I need to check. But this guy, it was a darker purple.
You've harvested most of it, though. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Great. I'll follow you to the next patch. So this area that we're in, you said had been there were tree stumps and that sort of thing?
So we're up on the hill. I know a lot of people here it's Skagit Valley. You're in the famous, tulips and fertile soil, and we have some of the best soil anywhere, and we do in the valley, but we're right up on the hill. So we're up where we're at, had been wooded until it's not been that long that this
I drove by a field with tons of tree stumps on my way here.
Yeah, so that actually just was cleared last year. So that's what our property was. It's more than 50 years ago, we believe, but so yeah, it had been all wooded. So typically what they do is pull the stumps, and then usually they get slash burned or piled. Well, some of our stumps were pulled, which leaves you with settling. So we have really uneven property. There's one section of the property that we have not yet regraded, and that, it's just roller coaster. And then the really challenging thing was we had areas where they buried the stumps, and so the stumps over time had rotted down.
Oh my gosh!
So we had sinkholes.
Right.
So some of them, we actually take it really long, sticks down to try to figure out, and could not find how deep. So we had areas of the farm that were off limits for the kids that first summer.
Yeah.
So the first process of even recapturing this as arable land,
agriculture,
was to pull the stumps. So luckily, my husband actually works in civil engineering and has access to heavy equipment and experience with moving dirt, and so that was what made this property a good fit for us. So we spent the first summer just pulling stumps. The soil was so heavy and compacted, and so much rock, that the first year, in order to even get going with planting anything, we actually trucked in soil and
Mhm.
created raised beds in the area I'll show you in a minute.
Right.
That's
I saw
now a
that.
vegetable garden.
Okay. And then this is almost all cut flower production. And what square footage would you say this is?
Oh my lands, I should know.
There's like 20 rows.
I think we have 17 rows that are 4 by 50.
Okay.
So that kind of gives a good. And like I said, we keep scaling back. I actually I had more rows in that area. Now it's all under progress for the next project. But it, definitely.
It looks like there's about half are devoted to dahlias and the other half are devoted to herbs and.
Yeah, so we have some perennials. I'm really trying to up my perennial game. One, because I really enjoy it. Two, because it makes a lot of sense for the kind of work that we want to do with flowers, and also building that, the farm being a beautiful place.
Right.
But yeah, right now that's kind of what's carried us is in terms of the farm, like having financial stability. So we have 600 dahlias in the ground this year. We had about 800 by the end of the season last year.
Did you let them winter over in the ground?
No, we didn't.
You dug them.
We actually get really, really damp soil. So I try to get them out just as soon as we get that first good window after frost. So yeah, so we have 600 in the ground this year. And most of like I said, the farm's financial stability comes from a tuber sale. This last few years, especially with not being able to host any events.
Right.
So with everything shifting, being online the last 2 years, the tuber sale was a great way to just float the farm because we could do it. You could ship. So
is that why you went down from 800 to 600?
No, that was really more just that piece of recognizing, number one, that I couldn't keep up with everything I had growing. Mm-hmm. And I either could scale up and hire employees and go bigger and sell more flowers, or I could scale down and make it fit our lifestyle.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a process of scaling down and making it fit our lifestyle. And I wish I could have, given myself permission or told myself 10 years ago when the kids were really little. There's always in the back of my head was this, idea that when they're out of diapers, or when they're sleeping through the night, or when they're school age, or when they can, fix their own peanut butter jelly sandwich, things are going to suddenly free up and there's going to be all this time and space. And there is absolutely, a different rhythm as your kids get older. But one of the things that I didn't recognize, I think it's just parenting as a bigger, picture, is that they still, the emotional intensity of them needing you and the busyness of needing to run them to this event and to that thing, or, to meet this friend.
Right.
Doesn't go away. And I didn't want the farm to overshadow that. And so that's why we've been just kind of constantly in this process still of refining and resizing until it fits what feels right for our family in the season we're in.
That's good.
Yeah.
You're cutting some really interesting oregano, I think, right?
Yes. This is wild marjoram. And
so it has a really long stem.
This I inherited from a friend, the start years ago. This is such a great standby in the garden. I adore this one. I did not get it netted. Again, this is show up as you are. This would do best netted. But it is awesome. Right now you can harvest it as a filler, or harvest it right now as dried, or earlier in the season it makes a really beautiful just foliage filler. So I love that usability in all stages.
But it's perennialized, right?
It is.
So you could net it next year and get longer stems or something.
Totally. And I think, even then, if I actually cut down to the bottom of the plant, that's average stem length unnetted.
That's crazy.
Yep. And you can grow this one from seed, but it really, it's really, really prolific. So it's also really easy. I actually just dig and divide. I'll just dig and divide my plants and split them into clumps and move over and take a little more space with it. But again, last year I actually downsized because I had double the size of this row and it was more than we needed. So instead,
you probably had somebody who was happy to take your extra clump.
I did. We're friends inherited them. So okay.
Wow. Okay.
I don't know. You have to. Oh, I'm still. You're going to be able to cut and stuff, right?
I'm having fun following you. Yeah.
I'm so glad. And hopeful that I'm on the right track sharing the things.
Oh, it's wonderful. Yeah.
All right, I am going to hop the road. This is what I always tell my kids. Don't hop the road. Don't do what I'm doing.
Well, you're kind of a one-woman show, too, because I'm sure your husband and kids help, but this is really...
They're tremendously helpful. There's lots of parts that they love. You know, if it's on a machine, they are happy to jump in and help. If it's weeding, not so much. But they have a lot of their own endeavors and responsibilities on the farm now. And so as they've gotten older, their interests and responsibilities on the farm have been much more focused on the animals. So they do really all the animal care. I don't really have daily responsibilities with the animals. So that's been a bigger commitment for their time.
So this year, Deanna, do you have CSA customers?
I do. We have a very small amount. Again, it was not choosing less but better for our family this summer. So we have a small CSA bunch that's just getting started next week. Actually, I really didn't want to gamble with pondering what was going to be in bloom in this mid. We don't have a lot of, next year I'd like to plant more biennials, but we didn't have a lot of that.
The earlier stuff?
Yeah, to really sustain us in that June window. And we didn't run spring subscriptions this year. I think I may next year. So yeah, they kick off next week. So we have a bouquet subscription, and then a few weeks after that, we have our dahlia subscription kicking off.
Just bunches of dahlias, which makes it easy. There's not a lot of production on that, right?
Yes, totally. And that was really my goal. How can we, you know, again, what makes sense for what we're doing and how much we have. And so it's just been this constant refining process. We are really, really lucky. We partner with an incredible little bistro in town, and they're a pickup site for our subscriptions, which honestly, to me, I love getting to put flowers in people's hands, but it's the connections that I really, really love most. And so, you know, every week getting to pop in and see the lovely ladies down there and share, and we always share flowers with them. You know,
Sure.
Has been a highlight for me.
So do you do one delivery day a week?
Yes. So we do Fridays. The 10 people just seem to be like Friday mornings. At least that's what's worked in our community. They're usually either gearing up for the weekend and they want them for, you know, an event over the weekend, like baby showers or whatever. Or they're winding down from the week and they actually like remember to pick up their subscription then. So yeah, it's that piece of like, well, what are we doing with the flowers they're producing? And we have two really big, you know, like, well, one really big focus with that, and that's sharing them freely in our community. Everybody has, like, we each have different responsibilities and privileges with what we have and different needs for what we need our land and our farms to do. And we have the privilege of not needing to live off the income of our farm. And that always feels such like a weird, vulnerable thing to say. But that's our reality, and that's a privilege and a luxury. And so the question has always been, what are we doing with what we have? And so that's why really the largest portion of what we grow on the farm gets gifted back in our community. And including the sales from our dahlia tubers. We'll talk more about the Growing Kindness Project.
Yeah.
But, you know, last year we donated 100% of the sales from the dahlia tubers to the Growing Kindness Project. And then this year, 50% of the sales to the Growing Kindness Project. And in terms of what we're doing with our flowers and our subscription sales, my goal this year was to sell enough subscriptions that I was able to afford help to come in twice a week with weeding and harvesting. And so it really, like,
that's so smart.
It was just a great way for us to be able to keep doing the thing that we love, which is gifting flowers freely in our community, but also to take off some of that pressure and hustle to maintain this all. Like, just, I have the sweetest high school gal. She's in our kids 4-H club, absolutely a gem. And she comes twice a week for 4 mornings a week and helps with weeding and harvesting. And it's just enough, the size and scale that we are, to keep it above water, or to give me the room to breathe, to say, okay, I've got to run the kids to, you know, bike riding lessons this morning. can you work on harvest while I go and do that?
Right.
So,
I think it makes it, you figured out how to make this model sustainable.
yeah.
And I would love to, we're almost done. We can sit down and talk a little bit about what started our conversation a couple of months ago when we talked by phone about the Growing Kindness Project, and just how that's been a beautiful surprise for you.
Absolutely.
That you started with something that was very personal, and it caught on with others, and you found a way for others to participate and not have to kind of reinvent the wheel for their own communities. So
I'm excited to dig into that conversation.
Great.
It all ties together so much. Like I said, I think it really, honestly, the biggest part, and again, it feels like a real I don't know, I scary in a way, vulnerability to say what the purpose of our farm is. And yet I wish that I was braver in that, because I think it creates more reality and authenticity in what we're doing when we all can share our purpose and our why.
Right.
And our whys all look so different, in flower farming, there are lots of people who are putting food on the table with their farm, or they're paying for their kids' college, or they're saving up for that Europe vacation that they always wanted to take, or all those things. And those are all real and meaningful whys. But I think also there's a lot of us in flower farming, if we're all being really real and honest, which feels scary and hard to do, that this is something that we love, that brings us joy, and we're trying to figure out what our why is in it. And I think that that's totally fine. But it feels scary when there's so much comparison happening and so much expectation on how we could or should be doing things.
Right.
To just kind of rip that Band-Aid off and say, all of our whys are going to look really different, and it doesn't invalidate what we're doing. It actually authenticates it.
Yeah.
So
I love that. And even just, I'm just realizing by asking you how you charge, I'm putting a set of expectations on a monochromatic flower farm. Of course everybody has, their finances figured out, and it's to make money. And so I apologize for that, because I feel like
I think it's a great conversation. This is so much of that conversation you and I were having of how do we create some transparency around that, that it's okay to do this for reasons other than being profitable. And that said, coming back to that, how do you create safety around and conversation around what does that look like? How do we honor those who are doing this and need to be making a profit on it? How do we make sure that what our why is and what we're bringing to the table and how we're doing it isn't taking away from another person's why?
Yeah.
And so I think a really big part of that, like you and I have talked about, is really deciding and being honest with ourselves if our intention's to be profitable, or if our intention is that this is a hobby and we love it, then pricing things accordingly. And we're in this kind of weird limbo stage right now. It's a little bit of both. Really, the farm supports the Growing Kindness Project. That's why right now I need it to be financially sustainable. That's why the dahlia sales have mattered. But we have brand new baby goats too.
I hear them.
They're sorry and loud. But just, peeling back that layer of, if we can be really honest with ourselves and our intention and our whys and what we need to get back from it, it makes it a lot easier to move into pricing models that reflect that with integrity for both what we're doing and for other people and what they're doing. So I think one of the really, I think there's a lot of fear about giving away product. If we give it away, it's going to be devalued. And I think what lies in that, actually, that's more fearful in the industry to me, is that when we are selling it at a really discounted price because it's a hobby, or because our why is to just make enough to be able to give back in our community or something, our pricing model does still need to reflect, if we're going to be selling. Hopefully this is a big topic for me, so I'm kind of spinning.
I'm following you.
I'm glad you are, because I can go on a rabbit trail. So thanks for your grace for this. if we're going to sell, our pricing needs to be competitive so that it's honoring those who are making a living off of this.
I thought that's where you were going with it. And I think that it shows your, I guess, just your integrity and intentionality about the larger community of your peers. When you sell your tubers, for example, you're selling them at the rate that other area farms are selling them.
Absolutely.
And the fact that you're choosing to use the proceeds to fund your nonprofit is part of your story.
Yes.
And it, it maybe makes people more interested in buying because they know the money's going to help the community in a different way.
Yeah.
But it's also for people who just love tubers and want to just grow the same varieties you have.
And like you said, for our peers, like protecting those. I mean, I have many. I like preaching to the choir. Like the flower community is filled with the most amazing, big-hearted, generous, thoughtful people. And I have many friends who work really hard to put food on their table and to get their kids through college and to help, finance their mortgage. And I want to make sure that I have clarity, and me having clarity in what I'm doing in a way that I do price the things that I sell. I think that creates respect for what they're doing.
Yeah.
And then it also creates freedom to be able to say, my why is just to give back in my community. So I can freely give, and that's not going to devalue their product. When I am freely giving, to organizations and individuals in need, that's not diminishing the value of their product. It's adding to it because it's drawing attention to, the beauty and importance of local flowers.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's a good point.
Yeah, so I've been a topic that I have been just kind of spinning on, considering, pondering for a long time. And
so define the Growing Kindness Project, or is it called just Growing Kindness?
The Growing Kindness Project. So what happened in all of my floundering and trying to figure out what it was that I was doing with this farm and all the mistakes I made, and some of the best things that have happened in the last 5 years have come from what felt like really big crash and burns. Some of the best things have come from big crash and burns in my first year, just in a series of mistakes and misunderstandings. I did not have anything to plant. The first year here on this farm, I should say, not the first year ever growing things. And I had pre-sold subscriptions, which is a really wise thing to do. Oh, you're a first-year market farmer? You should probably sell the subscriptions first and then figure out how to grow the flowers. But that's what had happened. So that's where we're at. And so
you felt obligated to fulfill those orders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I panicked, and at that point, because I hadn't started seeds, because I was holding them for these dahlias that I thought I was going to be getting. So I panicked and started asking around and just scrapped together every dahlia tuber cell I could find. It was late in the spring. I don't know if you remember Janelle McCracken. She was a flower farmer here in Stanwood. She retired a few years ago. When she retired, she sold me all of her, happened to be that spring, and she sold me all of her dahlia crops, or tuber stock. So just, scrapped together, and then kind of accidentally, I ended up with 500 dahlias. Panic mode.
Overbuy.
Yep. So then here we go. We have 500 dahlias. Well, of course, there was no way I had no idea that I was going to be producing that many flowers that first season. So we had always, it was really important to me that our boys knew how to interact in our community in ways that were meaningful.
So this became a bit of a family project then, right, Deanna?
Yeah, it really started out as a family project. So it was important for me that our kids got out in the community, and flowers just became this really easy catalyst to be able to do it. I wanted them to go in and visit elderly people in long-term care homes, but to just walk in empty-handed felt like a lot. So we had in the past, before we bought this farm at year 5, had gone and taken flowers from, our first little flower farm on our 1 acre to long-term care. And it was this beautiful opportunity. It literally opened doors and hearts. People, when they knew you were coming to give flowers, felt safe and welcoming. And so we could make those connections. Well, when we moved here and planted those 500 dahlias, it was swimming in flowers that first year. And so it was either compost them or do something meaningful with them. And so we would load up, we had a radio flyer wagon, that at some point the handle had gotten broken off of. So we had baling twine, like not even cute baling twine, like orange baling twine with a squeaky wheel. We'd just fill the buckets because at that point, again, it was that just go. Just start where you are. I didn't have time to make bouquets. I didn't have the manpower. So we would just take the buckets right from the field harvest, plunk them in the red flyer wagon, and tow it into long-term care. And the kids would stand with me and pick out flowers. We would go through at dinner time, which there was 4 o'clock. And it was the most joyful, incredible experience. And in that experience, something happened that made me realize that kindness given has this really tremendous ripple effect. So not only I always walked out of there feeling like I had taken something. Like it felt like such a gift to me. It just was so filling. And the kids, you know, they just glowed. They felt so proud of what they'd done. And it was hard. I have very shy, quiet kids. So it definitely was a nudge out of their comfort zone, but they felt so good about those connections. And what happened is I realized we were walking away feeling absolutely filled by it. Those that we'd given flowers to were just so grateful and joyful. And people would come up who'd observed. So, you know, cafeteria staff or people who are visiting their elderly parents and thank us and say, that just made my day. That just made my day. Just to see and observe. And so that's where I got brave enough to realize that, you know, kindness has a ripple effect and there's joy in the story as well. And so I put out on social media and just shared some little snippets of the boys sharing flowers. And I was really surprised by how many people reached back and said, thank you for sharing that. I was inspired. I went and shared flowers with my elderly, you know, long-term care residents, or I, you know, took flowers to, you know, wherever. And so that kind of just sat with me that later season. You know, here we don't really hit peak season until late fall, and then everything dies, and then it's school and it's busy. But it was that winter I was standing in the barn dividing hundreds, because of course too, I didn't realize they were actually all going to live and make it, and we were going to have hundreds and hundreds of dahlia tubers. And realizing that question that people had been asking me, how can I do this too? Like, how can I replicate what you're doing? Like the key to it was the dahlia tubers that I was holding, that we could give those freely and share them and encourage and invite other people in to do what we were doing. Because we could only go so far with the little red wagon and my 3 little boys. You know, my husband works, you know, regular 9-to-5 jobs, so slaves on the farm, but it wasn't like something he could even jump in and support during the day. And so, so we realized, you know, the key in this is not to hold it tight, but like to let it go and invite other people into it and to use what we have and give it freely to invite others in to join us. So we opened up our farm and said anyone who wanted to pick up dahlia tubers, as long as they promised they would share flowers at some point in their community, could come and get dahlia tubers. And then we had over 100 people show up at the farm, and they were so excited. And then as we were sharing that on social media, the question was like, could you just tell me, you know, more about it? What do I do with the dahlia? And then the questions started coming. What do we do with the dahlia tubers? What do I do now? How do I dig it up in fall? So we realized that it was one thing to give people with an actual supply, but it was kind of like, that kind of left them still needing more.
It's like that if you teach a man to fish, he will eat kind of thing. Like they had the tubers, but they weren't necessarily flower farmers.
Right. So these are just home gardeners.
Wow.
Who just were inspired to want to give and share flowers. And so from that, over the last 4 years, the Growing Kindness Project has evolved and grown. And we are now a 501c3 nonprofit organization, which feels like such a thrill and joy and terror to say. I mean, we have really big goals and dreams for being able to support people and doing this very thing. You know, flowers there is a universal language to flowers. And I jokingly will say that if you walk into a room with 3 things, people will instantly warm to you. And one is a baby, the other is a puppy, and the other is flowers. And babies and puppies are a lot harder to come by, but we all can grow flowers. And there's just this instant softening that even the most tough, hardened, closed off people will open. And it really was about the flowers being the tool and the catalyst for connection in our communities. You know, they were a gift too, but the real gift was like creating this open door for a moment of real meaningful connection.
Yeah, human connection.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, that's amazing. So right now, as a 501c3, is most of your energy just helping equip other people who want to grow flowers to sort of establish some kind of program in their community?
Yeah, it has been big growing pains in good ways, in really good ways this last year. The project, the response has been just overwhelming. And at first it's this thought of like, well, giving flowers to people, that's as old as flowers themselves. That's not novel or new, or it's not something that's not being done. Like, why form an organization around it? Why form a team around it? And the thing that we realize is that, number one, I think we all love accountability. And it creates this really great level of accountability when you're a part of somebody, when you have a really clear and meaningful intention of this thing that you're going to do. It supports you and creates accountability. Number two, I think that people really, we love to do things in community, and like really that's what the whole heart of this project is, community. And so it's like creating a community around these like-minded people who are really just really big hearts and want to serve in their communities. And so kind of pulling them together and putting this like mastermind of master hearts of people who really just have a passion for reaching out in their communities. And then like kind of the third leg of that is providing some of that education and support. And I definitely do not feel equipped to be the sage on the stage when it comes to that. And, at first I could offer some very basic, gardening instruction and how to on growing dahlia tubers. But what we realized again is there's this tremendous community in the flower world. And so we started reaching out and asking other people, hey, could you share your knowledge on this topic with this team and support them in this? And so we've had this incredible team of contributors who are flower farmers and floral designers from all across the United States who have offered their time and expertise to help educate the team. So it's been about just creating support in terms of like education and how to, and then creating community around like this team and this shared vision and heart.
There's sort of this internal connection with people who are on the team, and then the external connection that that's that ripple effect you talked about.
Yep.
But it's more meaningful because they feel more confident with their skill set or their knowage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or just encouragement.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's been, the part of the team and community building that we are building out the project to have that be really that it's about that not one thing. And just like in life, we all have something so beautiful to offer when we just bring what we have. It's kind of like this potluck of skills and talents. And so we have, one of the things I've been just loving this season is we have people who are in our project who are brand new backyard gardeners who are doing takeovers, during the week and just sharing. And they have all these just little nuggets of absolute treasure and big wisdom that they've learned on their journey so far that they're sharing with the team. Or also that just normalization of like, oh good, I'm not the only one who's battling weeds too. And then we have people in the project who are flower farmers, who are jumping on and sharing, like their more in-depth experience with something. And so it's just like this really beautiful blending of when everybody just shares what they have, and we all, walk away from it so filled.
So in 4 years, how has this mushroomed? How do you measure it? Is it by the number of team members or the number of stems given away, or do you even know?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. As we get legs under the project as a 501c and start to figure out all of these pieces, because that was a real awakening realization for me over the last few years. Because at first Anne Frank says no one ever becomes poor by giving. And I really do believe that in my heart of hearts. But the reality became really quickly that if I gave everything from our farm, every penny of profit, every stem of flowers, I still couldn't keep up with how big the project had grown and how quickly it had grown. And so we really started to look at what would be more sustainable for the long term of the project. And that's why we went to having options for membership. And so anyone can join at any point. That's our gardener role. And that's absolutely free of charge. It's, access to resources and support and connection. And then to tap into even higher level of training and education and materials, then that's a paid membership. And what that did this year was it created some breathing room for the project to be able to sustain itself this year. And of course, our long-term goal is, like, we would love to, have a grant writer working with us and to really be able to reach out in fundraising capacities in ways that we can support even more people with resources and education to get out in their communities and grow and give flowers.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to hear more about it, and I know you've got your own website for Growing Kindness Project and lots of extra information and details, so we'll be sure to share all that with the viewers.
If this is resonating in any way, jump in. We want you to join us. That's the thing. It's that I get questions sometimes like, well, I've never grown flowers. Like, perfect. We say, if you've got a little bit of dirt and a big heart, you have what it takes to grow kindness in your community. It really is about just jumping in and starting where you are. And then the other question I get is, well, I'm a flower farmer. I can't give away all my product for free. And that's an absolute valid concern. So we just really encourage that if you're a flower farmer and you become a member of the project, just make it clear, that piece like you and I were talking about, like what's freely given is truly freely given. And what you sell that supports your farm and your family, like that's your income, that's your livelihood. But it's okay to give freely alongside of that, or in addition to that.
Right. Or if you have a particular mission or cause, you articulate that to your customers so that they know there's these, this other part of your business that is community-based.
Yep. And so one of the things that we did actually, those tiny little things that are just a small detail, but they actually help a lot, was we created gift tags for bouquets, and they say Growing Kindness. These flowers are grown and shared with the hope that they brighten your day. Like, no strings attached. And really, the kids and I learned really quickly, and this has been something we really encourage our team in, is that we have to be clear in our intentions with people. Kindness freely given is it doesn't feel normal to us anymore. We always, as a culture, I think we have this sense of jadedness of what string is attached here.
Right. What's your angle? Yeah.
What's your angle?
Yeah, I agree.
And so the first time when we were in long-term care, it took me a little while to figure out. So Eli, our oldest, would take off with his flower bouquet, and he would go to a table to give it, and then he would come back with it. And I'd say, well, aren't you going to give it to them? And he said, they said they don't have their wallet. And he was so little, he didn't recognize that meant they thought he was charging. And so I really quickly had to equip them with the language that I grew these on our farm, and I want to give them to you. These are for you. And really quickly clarifying there was no strings attached. They were freely given. And so, we have those bouquet tags are available for download on the website. There's all kinds of just little things like that we've learned along the way.
That's awesome.
Help make it clear in your community and with, if you're a flower farmer, with your clients, what your intention is in these freely gifted flowers.
I love that. I love what you've picked too.
Thank you. I should grab a few more things. This is a hodgepodge for sure.
Oh, it's great. And if you have time to make a bouquet, we'd love to see it. But if you don't, we'll take a picture of it later on.
Okay, sounds great. I'm going to grab a few more things really quickly. We can head up and do that.
So have you been able to have people on the farm this year, or is it sort of coming out of COVID, you've just put that on hold?
We really held off until the state opened officially to schedule anything. And to be honest, like that full vulnerability, just like, let's show up where we are. This year has been overwhelming for me in getting this project off the ground, and the groundwork and the behind the scenes and the pieces. And so it's really been about learning my limitations and holding space for my family as well.
Taking a pause on all those events.
We have really put a big pause this summer. We will probably still have one or two things this year, but very minimal. And that's okay. I've really learning to lean into that, like, pausing or stopping doesn't mean you're quitting. There's a difference. And really just recognizing that it's okay to say wait sometimes. So kind of in in a waiting season on the pieces that normally happen around the farm. So, but it's created space to really to build this and grow this, which is meaningful and important right now.
And Deanna, will you do a dahlia sale this fall, or dahlia tuber sale, or?
We always have ours in the spring.
That makes sense.
Yeah, for us, it's just logistically what I can manage. So it gives me an opportunity to get the dahlias dug and divided and inventoried. So typically we go a little bit later spring. We're usually like March into April when we kick ours off. So yeah, and we're working on looking at what that looks like this next year, since so much of our proceeds from the sale go to the project, and hosting that in a way that feels really good for customers. Our Dahlia Tuber sale was 90% sold out in 20 minutes this year, which...
Say that again. I can't even believe that.
It was 90% sold out in 20 minutes.
Wow.
It wasn't even really, I mean, it was insane. We, sat there and watched the inventory just fly out the door. So we were down to, in 20 minutes, all that was left was 3 red varieties.
And were you doing this on like a Squarespace or?
Yeah, hosted off of our, we use, Squarespace is our website host.
Yeah. So they have a store and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yep. So just simple. The challenge is that the demand is so tremendously great for dahlias right now, or dahlia tubers. And a lot of the supply is coming from small farms. But as a culture, we're so used to online sales now and them functioning in a certain way that we have found that we have to be really, really intentional in educating people that come to the sale, which is wonderful when they're those who followed our farm or the project for years and they understand, that's that piece of tell your story, be the face of your business, because then people understand it's a real person, a real family behind it, because it's not a big enough sale to afford a big fancy e-commerce platform.
Right. And you can't hit volumes of any single variety either, probably.
Right. And so, we really, really educate people going into that. And, for the most part, people were really gracious and understanding when it sold out so quickly or stock they had hoped to get wasn't available. But it was really easy for us to see in the responses the people who they're really comfortable with the sales platform that functions in a certain way and didn't know the story of this being a family farm and their responses and disappointment to it being sold out really quickly versus those who really support us as a family farm and were purchasing because they wanted dahlias, but also knowing they were supporting the family farm. It was very different engagement and response to the sale.
Yeah.
Now, all that said, we are looking at formatting the sale differently next year to hopefully make sure it's a more enjoyable experience for everybody.
It's like growing kindness has growing pains.
Yes. Truly.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
Why don't you stop and I'll get a nice shot of you holding them, because I think we're running out of battery, so I think we're going to stop.
Not too much.
No, it's wonderful. Thank you so much. This has been such a great morning. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know I mentioned early in the interview that Deanna and I planned to sit down and talk more about growing kindness, but honestly, we were having such a great flow of conversation. I didn't want to interrupt it, and we just stayed in the fields as she was harvesting. Keep an eye out soon for details about a special Growing Kindness Project event taking place in August, hosted by Holly Chappell at Hope Flower Farm in Leesburg, Virginia, along with Growing Kindness Project ambassadors Sarah Dakin and Tom Brecht of Maryland-based Grateful Gardeners. As soon as we have those details, I'll share them in a full episode. You can also subscribe to updates at the Growing Kindness Project's website, growingkindnessproject.org. Our next sponsor thank you goes to Roadie.com, the same-day delivery platform that connects you and your flower deliveries with drivers already heading in the right direction. Learn more at Roadie.com. Hey, I have a fabulous bit of news to share with you today. We just learned that the Slow Flowers podcast received the 2021 Media Award Silver Medal of Achievement for podcast series in the broadcast media category, presented by GardenComm, the Garden Communicators International. This national award recognizes individuals and companies who achieve the highest levels of talent and professionalism in garden communications. The 2021 competition had more than 135 entries in 62 categories. Recipients of the silver medal represent the top winners in each competition category, who will now compete for the best of group in the areas of writing, photography, digital media, broadcast media, publishing, and trade. This is our second silver award for the podcast, so we're really thrilled. Thanks to all of you for listening and supporting the Slow Flowers podcast. And now, the Slow Flowers Show, our video edition, which you can watch every Wednesday live streamed on YouTube and Facebook Live. I'll share those links for you in our show notes as well. Our final sponsor thank you goes to flowerfarm.com. Flowerfarm.com is a leading wholesale distributor of flowers, sourcing from carefully selected flower farms to offer high-performing, fresh flowers sent directly from the farm straight to you. Find flowers and foliage from California, Florida, Oregon, and Washington by using the Origin selection tool in your search. It's smarter sourcing. Learn more at flowerfarm.com. The Slow Flowers podcast has been downloaded more than 750,000 times by listeners like you. That's 750,000 listeners. Thank you for listening, commenting, and sharing. It means so much. As our movement gains more supporters and more passionate participants who believe in the importance of our domestic cut flower industry, the momentum is contagious. I know you feel it too. I value your support and invite you to show your thanks to support Slow Flowers' ongoing advocacy, education, and outreach activities. You can find the donate button in the column to the right at DeborahPrinzing.com. I'm Deborah Prinzing, host and producer of the Slow Flowers podcast. Next week, you're invited to join me in putting more slow flowers on the table, one vase and one stem at a time. And if you like what you hear, please consider logging onto iTunes and posting a listener review. The content and opinions expressed here are either mine alone or those of my guests alone, independent of any podcast sponsor or other person, company, or organization. The Slow Flowers podcast is engineered and edited by Andrew Brenlin. Thank you so much to Andrew for helping me set up our new video podcast platform and for teaching me the technology. I'll be relying more on his talents in the coming days. You can learn more about Andrew's work at soundbodymovement.com.